to another edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I am Rabbi Richard Address, your host. Welcome and thank you for joining us. As you know, these podcasts are designed to talk about the impact of the longevity revolution on our families, our community, our congregations. And you can reach us for comments or suggestions to me, Rabbi Address at jewishsacredaging.com. And we also invite you to check out the Jewish Sacred Aging page on Facebook. And it is with a great deal of pleasure and some great anticipation that we welcome to Jewish Sacred Age Seekers of Meaning podcast today. Richard Leider and David Shapiro, the authors of a very, very interesting, really cool little book called Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Old? Subtitled The Path of Purposeful Aging, which we'll get to in a minute. So, Richard and David, thank you for joining us. Thank you very, very much from various places around the country. This is a really cool little book. And I want to start with asking you about, just to walk me through this one image, which is about in the middle of the book. You write about, we've all heard this inspirational quote. There's a reason your windshield is bigger than your rear view mirror. Where you're headed is more important than what you've left behind. What does that have to do with the title of this book? I'll start. Richard, go ahead.
Well, the other image is the rear view mirror, which is much smaller than the windshield, which is much larger. So as we move into the next phase of our life, the path of purposeful aging, we could be stuck looking in the rearview mirror and stuck with an old narrative about aging, or we could look at new possibilities in a more broad sense, and that's the path of purposeful aging. And as you said, the windshield's way bigger than the rearview mirror, and so sometimes what we find is that we're living a default life, and we want to change that. Default life is one we didn't actually choose. So the windshield is really about choosing and looking at the widest lens or widest possibilities. So, David, what would you say?
Well, we need the rearview mirror. That's one thing. We need to be able to see behind us, but that's not where we're going, even in later life, or perhaps especially in later life. And like Richard says, we can forget that. It's important to draw from our past, learn from our past, but continue moving forward. And that's what that image is meant to remind us of, that the path forward at every stage in our life, even the later stages, especially the later stages, is what we want to focus on, embrace, accept, really look at.
You guys have been friends, if I'm not mistaken. I think you mentioned that in the book for a couple of years, and rabbinic hyperbole.
Right.
What motivated you to do this? What motivated you to write this book? What was going on in your lives or triggered to say, we need to do this? Go ahead.
I'll take that on first, and then Richard. Richard and I have a long, abiding friendship and professional and personal relationship. And this book sort of emerged naturally out of the inquiry that we've been making into meaning and purpose in life for the past 30 some years. It sort of emerged organically out of spending time together and asking these questions of each other. The story that opens the book is about our spending time together at a rained-out baseball game. And that event that didn't happen gave us some real space to explore these questions. And sort of being interested in them, being fascinated by these questions, the book sort of emerged naturally out of that conversation, that long conversation having over the past 3.5 decades.
Yeah, this is our sixth book together. And so what evolved was, as we're getting older, does longevity have a purpose? What is it? We added kind of 3 decades to life in the last period of time, what's that all about? What are the possibilities and what are the problems? And so that's what we did. We wrote about that, and we used our own relationship and our own lives as part of the lens.
So you guys write a lot in the book about, and you refer to it as purposeful aging. And you talk about the path and practice of aging on purpose. I think that's the quote from page 91. But anyway, what do you mean by purposeful aging? Because the implication is, well, I'm not aging on purpose. What is this all about? Go ahead, David.
Well, yeah.
Let Richard take that one on.
Well, just spoiler alert here. You're getting older. We're all getting older. But aging isn't optional, but growing is. That's why we use the term growing. Are you getting old or are you growing old? You choose. So we're trying to help people make the choice to grow old. And what are the practices? What are the narratives of that? We grow up twice. First from adolescence to adulthood, but then the second growing up is from adulthood to elderhood. And so that there's not a lot of positive, a lot of it's about decline and everything else. We want to look at the positive side, the pro-aging as opposed to anti-aging narrative. And so if we grow up twice, how do we outgrow adulthood and grow into this next phase of life? So that's what that path is all about.
And the on purpose. Sorry. And on purpose has a kind of dual meaning. Of course, we're doing it purposefully. We're doing it intentionally. We're aging intentionally, thoughtfully, and with some sense of why we're doing it. But then it's also on purpose. I'm embracing the opportunities of aging, the opportunities to learn to become more patient, more giving, more kind. And all of that is with intention, on purpose. So there's both those senses of purpose.
And it's fascinating reading the book. This is quote not a Jewish book, but I mean we teach this all the time as part of the work we do in Jewish sacred aging around North America and in congregations. And in truth, this is exactly, if you take a look at the text from the perspective that from a theological point of view, this is exactly what you're talking about. And so in the beginning of the book, in the introduction, you write about, again, this purposeful aging, and you mentioned three reasons, three concepts around this thing. First, it's energizing and life affirming. It provides us with the why to get up in the morning, which is a real question for many people, especially post-retirement. Secondly, it makes us more resilient as we face the inevitable adversities of aging. And third, it enables us to grow whole as we grow older. The wholeness concept is, in Hebrew, shleimut, is very, very powerful. So with this idea and with this, what you're writing about purposeful aging, one of the tensions, I believe we teach a lot, that there's a lot of tensions in our maturing, as my mom would say. It was one of her favorite expressions. This tension of just existing versus living. Existing, because we know people who are existing. They just exist. As opposed to what you're writing about, if I'm understanding the book correctly, about living. How do you begin to talk to people as you discuss this and having them make this distinction and having them move from merely existing to embracing and living?
Well, we talk about it's a path, but also practices. And sometimes we're pushed by pain, and sometimes we're pulled by possibility to get on the path, so to speak. And but one of the things that I think is fundamental that we know is that it's a choice. And one of the people that we've quoted in all our writings is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and who I spent a week with back getting out of graduate school and studied deeply. And so one of the things that we try to get across here is that purpose is not a luxury. It's actually fundamental to health, to healing, to happiness, and ultimately to longevity. So having that reason to get up in the morning, one of the big sighs of relief from somebody, your mother would probably like this one, is we talk about purpose with a big P and purpose with a small p. And there's often a big sigh of relief because purpose with a big P is like, oh, I have to save the world. I have to be, I have a cause. I have to go volunteer. I have to. Purpose with a small p is a practice. What is it you could do today to make a difference in one person's life that would make the world better and make you better and more well? So it's not going to be long. What we've found where your doctor is going to be prescribing a prescription to you, you need a reason to get up in the morning, because that's how much the science now is filling in. That can science explain purpose? Absolutely yes. Now.
And David, you in the book you talk about this idea of purpose not as a noun but as a verb. So is that what also Richard's talking about? That to purpose, I purpose, you purpose, I purpose. Talk to me about what you mean by that.
Yeah, that's the practice part of it. It's something we do. Like Richard was saying, we can kind of get stuck in this idea of, do I have a purpose? But when we think about simply doing my purpose, then it becomes much more alive. Then it becomes something that's not so overwhelming. How can I give a little bit? How can I grow a little bit each day? That's what it is to purpose. So think of it in terms of something we do rather than something that we have.
And everybody's an experiment of one. We're not saying that you should do what we do. We're saying that's why we have such a difference of stories in the book of different people. That everybody's an experiment of one. And so we're trying to help people be their own best experiment, not live a default life that you just, predictable and maybe didn't choose it, and really say, what are the choices available to you in spite of the adversities? As Viktor Frankl says, say yes to life in spite of everything. And so we're helping people to do that.
There are people who living, as you write in the book, the default life. A life that they may not have chosen, maybe because of circumstances, they are living that life, even though they may not want to, but caregiving circumstances, health circumstances, that they're there.
Yep.
How do you talk to people about understanding this idea of loss? Because this conversation has come up repeatedly, especially in the last 18 months with the pandemic, and especially amongst our generation, boomers, the people ahead of us, and even some of the Gen Xers behind us, about loss. I remember I was teaching someplace last year, and a man in his late 80s said, Rabbi Address, I've just lost a year of my life. That at my age, I can't ever get that time back. It's not like I'm 30 years old, and loss is part of the natural process of aging if you live long enough. So how do you turn that acceptance of natural loss into the purpose concept that you're talking about? What's the secret?
Well, purpose is a mindset and a practice. And one of the stories in the book that reflects that is a story. I mean, as you said, purpose is life is a paradox. We have gain and loss. We have throughout life. It's not one or the other. It goes with being a human. One of the stories in the book is about a man named Ed Rapp, who was about to become the CEO of Caterpillar, the big earth-moving company. He was one of the presidents. And he got back from a business trip and found his foot was dragging when he was running, and he was diagnosed with ALS. And at 57, he had to quit retire, so to speak. And right now, every day he wakes up with a purpose. And that purpose, he's not going to outlive ALS. He's raised $15 million for ALS research, by the way, through his contacts. But every day at 8 o'clock in the morning in Raleigh, North Carolina, he gets up and has a phone conversation with a person he's never met and will never meet in person, who was also just diagnosed with ALS and who is terrified and wants to talk to somebody about it who actually has it and has experienced it. So part of it is isolation is fatal. Getting with other people who you trust, who can share the story with you and share the pain and the possibilities. So he's got tremendous loss, but he's also got tremendous gain. He says to us, to Richard and David, I'm living the good life. It's not the life I expected, but I get a chance to make a difference in one person's life every single morning at 8 in the morning, and I can't wait to get up and do that. So, that's a mindset shift. And so, I don't know, David, how you would take that. But
I think it's such a wonderful, beautiful, hard, interesting question to think about the role of loss in aging, because aging is all about those losses, loss of physical ability, loss of friends, loss of opportunities. But in each of those losses, as Richard says, and as the Ed Rapp story illustrates so beautifully, there is the opportunity for, and I don't mean to be a Pollyanna about this, but in each of those losses, there is an opportunity for some kind of gain, some kind of personal growth, some kind of deeper understanding of self. And if we can, with each of the inevitable losses, interrogate them in a way that allows us to grow and to be intentional about them, it doesn't make the losses go away, but it allows the losses, which are inevitable, and eventually the ultimate loss, the loss of our life, it allows us to find a purposeful path forward through those losses.
We have found it starts out the first chapter. The first chapter is the long conversation that you've already teed up, but the last chapter is the ultimate conversation, and that's about death and dying. And we give our own stories about how we feel about that, to bring more aliveness to life, not to be, it's not about death and dying per se. It's about living today and living purposefully, knowing that your most precious currency is time. Like the person said, I can't get that back again, but I can make choices with the time I have.
Yep. I mean, this is this is right out of the Torah, and it's right about our tradition. In fact, it's right out of the Torah portion. It was read on the afternoon of Yom Kippur in the end of Deuteronomy about choice. And I just wanted to ask you, in this concept of purposeful aging and living as opposed to existing, we still live in an American society that still, generalization, may be deemed as somewhat ageist. And still
somewhat ageist, totally ageist. It's very ageist.
I just want to throw that out.
It, Rabbi. No need to soft pedal it.
Yeah. As you talk, and how do you begin to deal with this attempt to have this positive view of aging when the society itself seems very content in many cases to deny that and to even accept warehousing, which is a horrible word, human beings and people, and even in the medical situation with Medicare, to having to impoverish a human being in order to have them accept care. How do you begin to, when you go out and talk to people as you're writing this book and living your lives, begin to counteract this reality?
Well, we took it on right with naming the book in the first place. Who do you want to be when you grow old? I mean, old is not a word that people embrace, but we do. Old is good. It can be good, in spite of the adversities, et cetera. And one of the things we do is to say, delete the word still "Oh, Rabbi, you're still teaching. Oh, Rabbi, you're still, well, who gets to decide what the rules are for that? I'm 77 and I'm still writing and speaking and doing things and leading walking safaris in Africa and doing things." And they say, "Well, can't you retire?" And I said, "Yeah, but why would I want to?" And
a dirty word.
well, you're still,
Dirty word.
I said, delete the word still.
Yeah.
And also we want to, it's a small point we make in the book, but I think it's a valuable point to realize. You're old for half your life. There's a young half and an old half. If we're just going to arbitrarily divide life, we can say, okay, you're young and then you're old. So there's the opportunity to be old longer. So we can embrace the idea of being old with all of the positives of it, rather than reject it. And again, this is not to deny the inevitable adversities and the societal challenges of being older, but it's also to recognize that it's an opportunity, not entirely a problem.
Yeah,
And we say right up front, aging is not a disease; it's a design problem. And so we're going to help redesign the narrative for what's possible here, with realities, as David says, with the realities that there's going to be gains and losses.
There are people working on that mosaic living to 120. I know a couple of people who are doing that. They're sitting in a laboratory in Variety City working on telomeres. And I keep asking them, look, it's cool if I can live to 120, but am I living at 120 like I was like 35, or curled up in a fetal position in a nursing home, in which case, maybe not that's such a good idea. There's a wonderful midrash from the tradition, which I can't quote exactly, but the sense is that it says, I think it's from Breshit Rabbah, that some people have years and other people have old age. In the sense of exactly what you're talking, it's the book. It's what you're writing about. Is there some people have lived, but they're living, and some people at 30, and you may know, and we know people, and some people at 30 or 40, they're already resigned and have stopped living. What's the impact and importance of of spirituality in this whole process?
Well, compassion is
just one of you. David.
We're both passionate about this, so we both want to talk about it.
Yeah, we wrote a lot and talked a lot about this one.
One of the real opportunities of aging is the opportunity to develop a greater sense of spirituality. We allude in the book to the traditional Hindu model of life, where the third phase of life, that's sometimes translated retiree, the vanaprastha stage of life, is traditionally you go into the forest and hang out with the monks and deepen your sense of spirituality. And that's perhaps the greatest opportunity of all in later life, to find a deeper sense of the divine, to make a stronger connection with whatever one's own sense of spirituality is.
And we write about this and talk about this in various ways and through different people's stories as well. But one of the things is that purpose is age agnostic. It doesn't come just because you hit a certain age. We find young people who are struggling with their own meaning and identity, midlife people, et cetera. And it used to be that having a midlife crisis was, we talk about that, and I've done a lot of talking and thinking and coaching around that. But now we wrote a whole thing on, are you having a later life crisis? And those are basically spiritual or existential questions, as opposed to achievement-oriented midlife type questions. And so we take it on, and I would say in a very practical way, I think.
Yeah, the late life crisis section here really reminded me of something that we in some of the workshops that we do, about the idea that there are people, as we get older, reach a point where they kind of understand or intuit that we don't need more stuff. We just don't need more material things. And that it's the time to begin to collect what I'll call spiritual. It's the spiritual capital, I call it. It's legacy. It's what this really means. It's what you're writing about in the book. And some people repress it. Some people just don't want to deal with it. And then some people embrace it and say, yes, this is really the harvest. I'm going to harvest, which I've run across a lot.
One of the great stories in the book, by the way, is Rabbi Zalman Schachter, who I met, and I'm involved in the organization From Aging to Saging, the International Saging. In fact, I'm giving a keynote at the upcoming event. But we write about that, the very thing you just said about the wisdom of becoming a sage, and as opposed to aging in a way that would be decline and all of that, as he sees it. And we report on this. And I knew him before he died, but he's deceased. But anyway, so I think that story speaks right into what you just mentioned.
So this is who do you want to be when you grow old? Richard Leider and David Shapiro, the subtitle being The Path of Purposeful Aging. Available, I guess, where all books are sold, including the great God Amazon, whatever. We're just about out of time. So just let me ask you very, very quickly. There are people who will be watching and listening to this who are contemporaries of ours, who may be, especially now post-high holidays, still in the middle of a pandemic, who are beginning to look in the mirror and say, what is this really all about? One quick piece of advice to all of them as they enter this new year. What would it be, David?
One quick piece of advice as you enter the new year. Probably that there is no one quick piece of advice.
That's good.
But also to use later life as an opportunity for growth, to embrace the opportunity to find a deeper sense of spirituality, to move through the world with greater love and compassion and grace and forgiveness. That's a big part of what it means to age on purpose and to grow whole as you grow old.
And I would add to that one practice. Purpose is a verb, and clarity comes from action, not just from thinking. So here's the action. Take the default purpose, which is to grow and give. Just 2 words, grow and give. And in the next week, wake up every morning and ask yourself, how am I going to grow and give today? And give meaning, there's 1,440 purpose moments in a day. It doesn't have to be any big deal that you go out and volunteer. You could just give someone a hug or a kind word or something like that. So take it seriously to grow and give for a week, and you'll have a felt sense of what this purpose thing is really all about and why it's so fundamental.
Richard and David, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom, and best of luck with the book. And say hello to the Saging people for me, because we've done some work with them in the past as well. Thank you very much. Take care. Stay healthy. And most important thing.
It's been a real
pleasure. To all of you, thank you for watching and listening to today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. Remember, you can watch us on Roku thingy, and if you don't know what that is, ask your grandchildren. We're also on a variety of different platforms. Again, we welcome your comments and suggestions to Rabbi address at jewishsacredaging.com. And if you'd like to make a tax-free donation to help support the work of Jewish Sacred Aging, go to jewishsacredaging.com, the homepage, scroll down and hit the conveniently located donate button. Seekers of Meaning is produced in the broadcast centers of the Lubetkin Media Companies in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And a big shout out to our award-winning producer now, Steve Lubetkin. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address, and I look forward to greeting you again on our next Secrets of Meaning podcast and TV show. In the meantime, stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy. Take care of yourself. Practice, practice, practice. Toda.